about sleep and people fall asleep, and that frequently happens. I don't know why, but I hope that I don't do that this time, because now I really am gonna talk about different things about sleep. Okay, so let's get started. I already mentioned that my core research is health informatics and also HCI, human-computer interaction. And human-computer interaction deals with a lot of different kinds of methods. And the first study that I mentioned to you was almost like a survey, a lot of data and video analysis or qualitative coding. But this one, it's a design and implementation project. So I will talk about different design goals, why I designed this, and then when you design something, you have to study this, you have to evaluate it in a proper way to show whether it has any effects. So it's a design, implementation, and evaluation type of research. Okay? So SleepTight, it's a self-monitoring tool for collecting different things about sleep, different triggers, and then sleep behaviors, and then help people reflect on their sleep behavior. So right now you're looking at my phone, Android phone, running SleepTight on the lock screen. So as you can see, it's a lock screen widget where you can quickly capture different things about sleep. And those are 5 things, like meal, exercise, caffeine in your beverage, tobacco use, and medication. So these are different triggers that might impact your sleep quality. And it has a timeline over 18 hours. So the blue bar here is the current time. And then you can see my sleep duration. And then the quality, it's red or orange, and which means really bad, really sleep. And then all these tick marks, it shows different activity, like, let's see, I had meal at 9 a.m. right after I got out of bed. Had lunch around 1:30 and then had some snacks at 3. And then you can also see that I did exercise twice a day, which never happens. So you can see that this is fake data. I had coffee around lunchtime, and then had medication. So as you can see, whenever you click all these different icons, it captures that particular behavior, and it shows your sleep and then your triggers at the same time. So I'm gonna talk more about why I designed this. And the design of SleepTight was, I was inspired by the first study, Quantified self-study, because I was able to identify many different kinds of challenges that they had. So I wanted to I wanted to address some of the challenges that I found in designing this particular tool. So the first design goal was capturing those target behaviors and triggers. I already mentioned that one of the challenges that people have is they only track target behaviors but not the triggers. So that whenever they want to improve their target behaviors, they don't have any clue. So I wanted to support collecting both of these triggers and target behaviors. The second design goal was lowering the capture burden, because if the capture burden is too high, they just quit tracking out. So it's so important to lower the tracking burden as much as possible. The third design goal was providing feedback to help with self-reflection. So after they collect a bunch of different kinds of data, they should be able to easily reflect on their sleep behaviors. So the first design goal, capturing those target behaviors and triggers. What does this mean in the context of sleep? Well, target behaviors is, of course, sleep behavior, but you need to define in a more concrete way what do you mean by sleep behavior. And that could mean things like sleep duration, so what time you went to bed, what time you woke up, then you also know the duration between those 2 timestamps. And then another important thing is sleep quality. So right after you wake up, how do you feel? What do you feel? So that's more subjective sleep quality. It could be anywhere from like groggy or very refreshed. So it's subjective sleep quality. So the first one, sleep duration, all those timestamps are objective sleep measures, and then the sleep quality is subjective one. And what do we mean by triggers in terms of sleep behaviors? There are 6 main things drawn from sleep literature. So there are lots of studies regarding different triggers that impact people's sleep quality. Those are things like the time of meal. So when you eat has something to do with your sleep, especially the nighttime, the meal. So if you eat really late or if you have really spicy food, that might impact your sleep quality. The second one is medication. So it depends on different kinds of medication. It could be sleep-related medication or other things. Caffeinated beverage is the popular one. We all know that caffeine has something to do with sleep quality or the time of sleep onset. But some people feel that there's nothing to do with their coffee and their sleep behavior. Another popular one is the exercise. It could be different types of exercise. Things like yoga might be helpful with sleep quality, but other things like running or very strenuous exercise is not good with sleep because it increases your heart rate. Another factor is alcoholic beverage. So some people think that drinking of alcoholic beverage helps them sleep better, but usually it's not. And then the last one is tobacco use. So here are the 6 most important factors that trigger that impacts people's sleep quality. And I learned about this when I collaborated with sleep experts. So here's another important. When you want to design any kind of health-related technology or application, you have to work with domain experts. So in this case, it's sleep researchers and sleep clinicians. But if you are designing something for heart disease patients, then you have to work with domain experts working in that field because they see really differently. So, for example, these 6 factors, it's something that they just know in their head, and they point to the right literature so that we can actually read and those domain knowledge are just so important when you design this kind of application. Now, how do we capture both target behaviors and triggers? Well, this is the application page. So the target behaviors, for this version, you type in the time you went to bed and the time you woke up. But now there are so many different studies that show you can actually automatically infer those timestamps from just by using your phone. So because it really works well for college students because the first thing that you usually do right after you wake up is turning off your alarm clock and checking Facebook and messaging other people. So the first time that you use your smartphone can infer when you wake up. And what do you do right before you go to bed? Same thing, college students, they usually check their email, they message people, and then they check their Facebook. So just by the natural use of your smartphone can infer those 2 timestamps. So those can be collected automatically. It's amazing, 90% accuracy. And then all these smiley and frowny faces, these are this refers to your different sleep quality, subjective sleep quality. So if you sleep well, then you click all this smiley face, but if you feel groggy, you click on this frowny face. The other triggers like this, so this is a timeline that you can see on the app. So you can drag this blue bar and then you just click one of these icons which captures a timestamp and different kinds of activity. lock screen widget too. So, for example, if you click any of this, it captures this particular activity and then captures the timestamp. So it's just one click. Lowering the capture burden to create a consistent capturing habit. Well, this was, I think I mentioned this to you, but if you click the campaign, then it adds the tick marks here. You can also, so this whole timeline here, it's also a shortcut to the actual application. So if you click anywhere on this timeline, it will open up this full application so that you can capture the previous activities. You can go back to yesterday or the prior day so that you can capture retrospectively different things. And then after you capture all these different things, it has to show you different feedback. So there are many different ways of showing the feedback. The first one is from your lock screen widget, where it shows the time duration, the sleep duration, and then the quality. So here, the greener the better. The red is for sleep. So sometimes it's like 6 hours and 33 minutes and smiley face. And if you click anywhere on this timeline, I mentioned that it opens up the actual application. So then here you can see the full timeline across 24 hours, and you can also go back to the previous days. And then there is the summary page where it shows your sleep quality over 4 weeks. So here you can see the bars, it means the sleep duration. The different color means different sleep quality. So yellow is the neutral color, and this person actually sleep quite well because you can see like they are very consistent. So the workflow looks like this. Every morning, everything resets. So every morning you will see something like this, and if you click here, it will open up the sleep diary where you capture your subjective and objective sleep measures, and that's once a day thing, so you capture every day. After you capture your sleep, it shows it's added on your timeline, so this big line, big chunk on the left bar, it's the sleep quality. And then throughout the day, you capture other triggers. And then the next morning, I said everything resets, so you will see that, okay. So after you capture your sleep gets added to your widget, but then the next day, everything resets so that you can capture the following sleep cycle. So this is a lock screen widget, meaning that you can access this widget without having to unlock your phone. You can do the same thing without the widget, but it just takes longer. So for example, you first have to unlock the phone. You have to find this particular icon, and then you open up this full widget, and then there's this icon called sleep where you can capture your sleep diary. So you can do the same thing without the widget. Or with the widget like this one. So I was really curious whether having this kind of widget on your lock screen has anything to do with lowering the manual capture burden. So that's why I designed these two different versions of sleep. So I mentioned that if you design something for research purposes, you have to evaluate it in a proper way to see if if, for example, this kind of widget has anything to do with lowering manual capture burden. So here's the study design. So we deployed the system for a month, and there were two different conditions. The first condition is the app-only system. So this is just a regular application. The full system condition had the regular app, the lock screen widget, and then the home screen widget. So if you have widget, you can install it on your lock screen as well as home screen. So it just provides multiple ways of collecting data, and then you don't have to unlock your phone, which is great. So this was the full system condition. And then the study design looks like this. It was a 3-phased study. So the first phase here, right before the deployment study, there is the interview and questionnaire session, and then during this time people came to the lab, and then I installed this application to their mobile phones. And then during 4 weeks, it's a deployment phase where they can use this application however they want. And it was their own phone instead of a research phone, so that they can just use their phone as much as they like. And then after the 4-week period, they came back to the lab and we did a debriefing interview, and then they filled out a questionnaire. And I deployed this to 22 participants. So half of them I assigned to the app-only condition, the other half I assigned them to the full system condition. It was a random assignment. And then I'm going to talk about the findings. So here are the things that I was really interested in. So the first one is sleep diary adherence. So the assumption here would be if the manual capture burden is low, then the adherence rate will be high. So that would be the assumption. So it's essentially counting the number of diaries that people captured over the 4-week period. So did people actually use this for the deployment phase? The other thing was something to do with accuracy. So I call this time difference between when activities were conducted versus when they were captured. So what this means is that, let's say I had coffee at 3 p.m., but I actually captured that behavior at 6 p.m. and the time difference would be 3 hours. And the assumption here would be if the time difference is shorter, then the accuracy would be higher. If time difference is larger, then accuracy would be lower. So it's good to have shorter time difference. The other one I was looking for was use of customization features. So those 6 triggers that I mentioned, those are drawn from sleep literature. But one interesting thing about sleep is it's very individualistic. So people might have different triggers, and they should be able to add their own individual triggers, right? So I provided an ability to add their own triggers, and I was curious how much people use those customizable features. And then lastly, types of self-reflection. So what did people learn using this system? So what kind of self-reflection do people do? So the first one, sleep diary adherence. The full system, the adherence was 92%, and then the app-only system was lower, 73%, and it was statistically significant. So it's good, right? So a lot of people using the full system captured many sleep diary, like here, 25.89. And then when you look at different activities that you can do with this application, this is just showing visually. So what this means is that these different tick marks indicate different types of events. For example, add an activity, or add sleep, or looking at the summary page and things like that. So the dense visualization means that you are actively using the system. And then the coarse visualization means that you didn't actually use a lot of different things. So as you can see, people in the full system, they used it pretty heavily. I was pleasantly surprised. The x-axis are showing different subject, the participant, from 1 to 8, and then the y-axis is from day 1 to day 28. So this is also good. Time difference between when activities were conducted and captured. So the full system, the difference was about 7 hours. This was really striking to me, because what this means is that even though I gave them a tool to capture a real-time activity, they didn't use it that way. There was still 7-hour difference between when an activity happened and when they actually captured the behavior. App-only system, it was longer, 11.7 hours. And here's the graph of how people used such systems. So the x-axis is hour of day, so 0 means midnight, and 24 means another midnight. And these are number of activities that people captured throughout the day. And as you can see, lots of people capture their activity right before going to sleep, for both full season condition as well as abnormal season condition. So I thought why this happened, and let's say you're having coffee with your friend or you're having meal with your friends, and it would be so awkward to open your app and then capture that activity while you're having this social event with other people. So even if we gave them real-time tracking tool, that's not how people use it. They track their behaviors at the end of the day, because once you open the app, it's so easy to capture a series of different events that happened throughout the day. So essentially, this is what people did. So something to do with finding patterns. So there was a summary page where people could visualize their sleep events over the 4-week period. So here, let me use this. So each bar indicates each day. The y-axis here represents 24 hours. And then here it shows different important sleep measures, such as the average time that they went to bed, average time that they wake up, and then things like sleep efficiency or average sleep onset time, how long did it take to fall asleep. So this was really a good way to capture the overview of individual sleep behavior. Let's see. I can read it from your So one thing I want to mention is this one, sleep efficiency. This is what doctors are looking for. So the way they calculate sleep efficiency is the time that you actually had sleep divided by the time you were lying on the bed. So essentially you want to make it close to 100%. That means right after you lie down, you fall asleep. And then right after you wake up, you got out of bed. So you want to make it close to 100%. And if it's over 90, that's pretty good. And those who have insomnia, this number is really low, like lower than 75%. That means the person lying down on the bed, trying to sleep, but couldn't really sleep, is an indication of insomnia. So when doctors looking at this kind of numbers, if it's over 75%, then that's a red flag. So SleepTide automatically calculates this kind of number so that it can be useful for screening insomnia. And if you compare these two people, this person, one of our participants, sleep was very inconsistent. And this empty bar means that this person missed 4 different sleep diaries for some reason. If you look at this person, it's very consistent. Sleep quality is pretty good, although the first person is all yellow-green, so which is good, but this person is neutral, so relatively good. But then some days, occasionally, this person didn't sleep very well. And then if you look at this part, if you look at this pink-haired light, this means that the time that they were lying on the bed was still awake. So you want to make it, you don't want to see this red bar. So this kind of overview really helps in the individuals as well as the sleep doctors to capture what's going on with individual sleep. Now, what did people learn from using this kind of application? So one thing that people recognized was their sleeping patterns. And this was put into a neutral statement. So for example, my time to go to bed is a little inconsistent. So this would be a type of data-driven insight that they learn from this kind of visualization. But others, it was a disproof that they find this something different from their initial knowledge. So something like, I don't drink as much alcohol as I thought I did. So a lot of people, they already have some kind of assumption about their own behavior, but then if they start tracking something, then their assumption doesn't meet. So that's what I mean by disproof. And then some people, they create hypotheses. So they use this kind of tool as a hypothesis generation tool. So an example would be drinking alcohol seems to lead to poor sleep. So this was very intentional because this person didn't draw causality from this kind of tool. Rather, this person created hypothesis. So now that the person created hypothesis, then he can do more systematic self-experimentation to see if that's really true. And this was a lock screen widget, and it can be easily visible by other people around you. So for example, if you are using your smartphone, it's so easy for you to look over what the person in front of you is doing. And now we are visualizing and putting a lot of sensitive information like sleep duration, sleep quality, whether you smoke cigarette, whether you exercise or not, everything onto your lock screen. So some people were cautious about putting all this information on your lock screen. So now there's this trade-off. Lock screen is so easy to access, and that's why the capture burden is low. But then that means the information put on your lock screen is now visible to other people around you. So there's the interesting trade-off between these two. So this person, the first one, this is actually a snapshot from the actual participants. And this person didn't sleep very well. And he was curious what his boss would if their boss knows that he didn't sleep very well. For this person, he actually drank 4 alcoholic beverages and then did a long chunk of evening work. So what would your friend or your boss would think if they knew that this person had lots of beer and then did the work afterward? So that kind of information is now visible to your last screen, so think about that. Another feature that SKKU supports was capturing routines and anomalies, especially what you did right before going to bed. Because part of the diary, there was a section where you just check mark the things that you did right before going to bed. So this person, when she had a good night's sleep, here are the top 5 things that she did, which was brushing teeth, using restroom, chatting with her husband, watching TV, and social media use. So pretty common things that people do right before going to bed, right? When she had neutral sleep, what she did was brushing teeth, using restroom, chatting, social media use, watching TV. So essentially the same thing that she did when she had good night's sleep. So initially I thought that capturing the behaviors that they did right before going to sleep was important, but then it turns out that capturing the routine is not that important. What you really need to capture is the anomalies, what you did differently from the other nights, because those can be triggers. So once you realize your normal routine, then you don't have to capture all of this. But for example, when you were in your friend's home, or you had visitors, or you were traveling, those things are actually more important things when you think about capturing. Yep, so rare events are more valuable data points. Okay. So I talked about the 3 initial design goals, which are capturing those target behaviors and potential triggers, lowering the capture burden, which turned out to be true from the adherence rate, and then providing feedback to help with self-reflection. People did a bunch of different self-reflection when I asked them what they learned. In addition to that, some of the surprising findings were supporting customization. So some people, they like to see from their lock screen, others didn't because they were more privacy conscious. Some people, they add their custom activities, which was good. Others, they didn't care, and a lot of people actually don't change default settings. And identifying and capturing anomalies turned out to be really important things when you want to find more different triggers that impact sleep quality. So this was the summary for the sleep type study, and I have a short, a very different type of study. Before I switch gear, yes.
You mentioned that visualization is important for self-reflection.
Yes.
You choose the bar chart for tracking users' sleep pattern. I was wondering how you can evaluate or manipulate self-reflection data.
Based on different types of visualization.
Yeah.
Yes, that's actually a visualization question which I didn't address here because I just choose one visualization and then deploy that one version. So the next study that I'm going to present actually deals with showing different visualizations and see how people respond to that. So it's coming up, but it's a different context. But you have a fair point that different visualization might have different effects in terms of self-reflection. And that also has something to do with the method that we use. Because I did deployment study, I could only deploy to 20-something participants. So that's why I chose, I could only create 2 different versions because then there are only 11 people can use one condition. So those are all limitations attached to this particular deployment study method. But this study that I'm going to present right now, it's a survey study with 400 participants. Because now I have more people, then I can create more number. Oops, sorry. Because it's a survey study with more number of participants, I can create different number of conditions so that so yeah, it's coming up. Other questions before I switch gear to this study? Shall we move on? Okay. The last project, which is performance feedback, how to nudge people toward positive behaviors. So when I introduce you to 2 different kinds of behavior change strategy, the first one was more proactive one, so that you, thank you. Yes, thanks. The first type of behavior change strategy was proactive one, so the individual, they choose to join a gym club, they choose to do more rigorous diet, but the second one was related to nudging. So the designers decide how to manipulate different conditions. So this example is the nudging example. So how I leverage this concept of nudging when creating different visualizations for visualizing performance feedback. Okay. Are you familiar with this activity tracker called Fitbit? Raise your hand if you are familiar with it. Okay. Not many. So I will explain this. So there is a wearable sensor called Fitbit, but there are other similar ones too. It automatically tracks your step counts. And then after they track step counts, there are many different ways of showing the step counts. One way is to show the remaining step, like the first one. So it says get 268 steps more to hit your daily goal. So in this context, the daily goal is set to 10,000 steps, and it shows the remaining steps to hit that 10,000 step goal. Another way of showing the same information is to show you the achieved steps. So the same information, different framing, it says 9,732 steps. So essentially, those are the same information, but using different framing. So, as you mentioned, different framing, different visualization might have different effects. So I was curious which one is a better way of presenting the same information. So that was my question. And I was inspired by the framing effect from the behavior economics literature. Tversky and Kahneman, they are Nobel laureate. They came up with this interesting concept called framing effects. So an example is, if you look at this glass of water, is this half empty or half full? Different way of framing the same information. And if you think that's half full, then you might have very positive, optimistic perspective of life. If you think that it's half empty, then you might be more pessimistic point of view. That's how other people interpret this. But essentially, this is the framing effect. It's same information, different framing, then that might indicate something. A classic example is how you describe the odds of ruling operations. So one doctor might say 90 out of 100 patients are alive after 5 years. Other doctors might say 10 out of 100 patients are dead after 5 years. So let's say you have to decide whether you want to take this operation or not. And these two doctors are saying these two different things. Same information, different framing, and this has a lot to do with whether people take this operation or not. This is really crazy if you think about it, because what do you think, so which one do you prefer? First one? So what that means is if the doctor says the first one, then you're more likely to take that operation, right? So that was actually studied, and as you mentioned, a lot more people prefer the first kind of operation. What this means is that if the doctor wants you to take the operation, he will use the first kind of framing to manipulate your decision, right? Or vice versa, if your doctor don't want you to take the operation, then he would use the second framing so that you are less likely to take the operation. So I learned about this framing effect, and I was really curious how I can apply this in designing interface. So let's apply this in terms of designing step count performance feedback. So let's say a daily goal is 10,000 steps, and one way of showing this information is showing the positive framing, showing the achieved steps, like, oh, you achieved 2,500 steps, okay? And this was a hypothetical study, meaning that I showed this feedback to people using survey method. So wherever they are, what time it might be, they just show the same feedback information using the survey. Another different condition, they show the remaining condition like this one, the same information, different framing, showing the remaining steps. And this was just 2 out of 8 different conditions that I created. We also varied the different things like raw step count versus percentage information, and having the visualization or not, so visualization versus text information. So if you put everything together, there is the balance, the positive and negative framing, the presentation, text versus text plus visual, data unit, meaning the percentage information versus the raw data. And then I also vary the distance to the goal, so meaning that it's easier to show it. So balance, it's achieved versus remaining. Presentation, text only versus text with visual. And in this case, the progress bar was the visual. And then the data unit, the raw information. So here, it's just a raw step count information versus percentage. So you achieve 25% of the goal. So this creates 8 different conditions, right? Because it's 2 by 2 by 2. And then I also varied the distance to the goal. So there were 2 timestamps. So low achievement level at the 25%, and then the high achievement level of 75%. So putting everything together, if it's achieved text only raw condition, it will look like this because it's text achieved the achieved steps, and then the raw information. And if it's remaining text only raw condition, it will look like this. So same information, different framing, and if you put everything together, these were 8 different conditions that I created. Are you guys following? Nod your head if you are following. Okay? Okay. So what did I measure? I measure self-efficacy. It's an interesting concept. And to put it briefly, self-efficacy is an indicator to your actual behavior. If you think that you can do it, it's more likely that you will actually do it. So because it was a hypothetical scenario, I couldn't measure their actual behavior, but I could measure the self-efficacy. So if people show this feedback and if they think that they can do it, then it's more likely to do the actual behavior. So self-efficacy can be measured in many different ways. This is one way to measure it. Just using Likert scale from 0 to 10, and 0 would be certain I cannot meet my goal. If I look at this feedback at 4:30 p.m., there's no way I cannot meet my goal. And then 10 would be certain I can meet my goal. So this is one way to measure the proxy to the actual behavior. It's a very well-known concept that's studied and using in many different fields. And I did a convenience sampling of 400 people, and then randomly assign them to 8 different conditions. So now onto the result. There was a main effect of balance framing, meaning that self-efficacy was higher when people look at the achieved framing versus remaining framing. And this was between subject conditions. So people in one condition, they only saw that particular feedback. Okay? So what this means is that if you want to make people achieve their goal, it's better to use the achieved framing rather than remaining framing. Okay? There was main effect of presentation type. So people in the text-only condition, they showed higher self-efficacy than text with visual. Can you guys reflect on why this might have happened?
Text-only condition is more systematic processing by our perception of information.
Actually, it's the other way, but you hit the important concept, which is what's more systematic or what's more objective thinking. So when you think about framing effects, it happens because people are irrational. So if everyone is rational, then framing wouldn't matter because they are looking at the same, they are receiving the same information, and then the framing wouldn't matter, right? But framing effect happens because people are irrational. They think that if they see something positive, then they actually think that they did more. They achieved more. That's why we see this happening, right? So here, I suspected that if we show this visualization, the progress bar with the text, I think this makes people more rational, and they exactly know where they stand. They exactly know that they achieved the 25%, but if they only look at the text-only condition, I think they think that they achieved more. So they are irrational, basically. That's how I interpret this result. There could be many different ways of interpreting this result, and that's the limitation that we have with this kind of survey method. We only know the result, we don't know why. Okay? Lastly, there was interaction effects between data unit and distance to the goal, meaning that and this effect was not observed for the distance to the goal at 75% level. So when we use the raw data unit, so 2,500 steps rather than percentage, people's self-efficacy was higher. But then this effect disappeared at the goal achievement level at the 75%. So when you are low, when you are performing low, it's better to show the raw text unit. But then if you already achieved high, like 75%, then this doesn't matter. Okay? Right. So implications. So all the design evaluation study has implications for design. And from this study, there are a few things that I learned. The first one is give feeling of bigger achievement. It's better for higher self-efficacy, and there are many different ways to give higher, bigger achievement. For example, manipulating the data unit was one thing. Another one is using the achieved framing rather than remaining framing. So if we make people feel that they've achieved more, it's actually better for higher self-efficacy. And then, more broadly speaking, small design decisions could influence the outcome. And when designers, when they design commercial products, they don't do this kind of manipulation study. They just design the one interface and then deploy it. But I think that as a designer, there are so many things that we can test and we can manipulate, or we can use those methods to design better interfaces. So this is just one way of doing that, creating a hypothetical survey and creating different visualizations to see which one works better, and then actually choose that particular visualization for real-world deployment study. So small design decisions matter. So whenever you design any kind of interface or any kind of visualizations, keep this in mind. What kind of data unit you're going to use, how you're going to frame your data that you want to present to other people. And then to conduct quick design tests, now you can use crowdsourcing user tests using mechanical Turk if it's difficult to recruit participants. Okay?
So crowdsourcing user test is how is it? People respond well?
People respond because they get paid, but they get really small payment, like for example 10 cents per survey. That's
very small.
So Amazon Mechanical Turk, that's a crowdsourcing platform where you can just deploy a survey, for example, and you can actually assign how much money you want to pay. So it's your decision how much money you want to pay. If you pay them a lot, you will get faster response. if you pay small amount, you will get response, but slower. So there are many tricks that you can do with mechanical Turk platform.
How much did you pay?
What?
How much did you pay?
So I usually pay. It really depends. I usually pay maybe 20 cents per a survey that takes less than 5 minutes. But if I need quicker response, then I increase. I pay them more. But this particular study, I first tried mechanical Turk, but then I decided not to do that because for this one, it was so important to recruit people who are interested in exercise. So using mechanical Turk, there's no guarantee that I will get the pool of participants who I am interested in, because anybody just participate there. So here I deploy to a particular mailing list where I know that these are people who regularly exercise. So that's another limitation of crowdsourcing platform. So it's difficult to get the target population that you really like. So what people do is they create a screener as a first step to screen people out, and then they recruit only those people to take the actual survey. So there are many different things you can do with mechanical Turk. Yeah.
I also have a question about the framing, two framings. You did it each framing separately, but have you thought about mixing those two frames? Because like recently I noticed like Nike running app does the achievement framing before 50%, and after 50% it starts doing the remaining framing, and it was very interesting. And have you thought about deploying that research?
So I think creating that kind of interface has different goal than this particular study. So now that we did this study, we know that it's better to use a particular frame at the low achievement level, and then we can use different framing at the higher achievement level. So now that we know this, you can use and mix and match whatever visualization that you feel more appropriate for the actual deployment version. So it's interesting that they actually did that, and I hope that that's actually useful. Okay. Before I move on to the last summary page to wrap up. Okay. So first I presented this framework self-mounting technology, which started from configuration, data capture, and feedback. And there were particular questions for each of these phases. And now I want to summarize what I learned for these phases. So during the configuration phase, you really need to help people track what they need to track. So going back to the sleep type, I work with sleep experts to figure out what are the most important triggers for sleep quality. So suggesting those relevant factors is good, but then you also need to support customization because they might not be relevant for individuals. So start with something that's well known, but then support customization features so that people can add or edit what they really want to try. In terms of data capture, lowering the capture burden, remember, it's so important. Without this, people won't use it, whatever you design. And it has everything to do with increasing the tracking adherence. And also a separate dimension is the accuracy. Increasing the data accuracy is also important. And in sleep type design, I mentioned the time difference as a proxy for data accuracy. In terms of feedback, providing feedback in a positive light, for example, using achieved framing is important. And increasing self-reflection and awareness. Remember the summary phase where you can see your sleep data over 4 weeks. Just by looking at that, you can quickly capture what you did over the 4 weeks. So what kind of feedback could be beneficial for self-reflection? It's important. Another interesting thing is when this reflection happens. So normally people think that reflection happens at the end of the self-tracking, but it doesn't. It also happens when you capture your own data. So for example, when you capture your data manually, that's when you think about your data. And same thing with food tracking, for example. If you capture what you eat, the moment that you capture your data is when you think about what you ate. And then of course you can show aggregated feedback at the end when you have more data points, and it shows different kinds of insights at the end. But one thing to remember is that this self-reflection happens during the data capture phase as well as feedback phase. Okay. So I want to share really briefly a couple of projects that I'm doing right now. The first one is called Visualize Self, which is designing a platform where people can explore their personal data once they upload their data. So creating visualizations is very difficult for lay people, so I am trying to help non-experts explore their data in a more meaningful way. So this is one project I'm doing. I'm also interested in helping people share their data, especially I think kind of personal health data can be leveraged in medical decision making. So how to support people to share their data with their doctors is one thing that I'm really passionate about. And this can be more general, like meeting your primary care physicians, or it could be more domain specific, like meeting your sleep doctors. It has different challenges for these different purposes. Lastly, I'm really interested in helping people share their tracking data across generations. So for example, sharing your data with your parents, or you're sharing your data with your grandparents. And it has very interesting implications when you share when you share personal health data among these different generations to create this notion of family health and talking about family health in this manner. So this is a separate project I'm doing right now. So with that, this is my last slide. I want to thank my collaborators. They are mostly at University of Washington, my advisor, Julie and Wanda, and I have closer collaborator at Microsoft Research. And the funding sources are Intel, NSF, and Google. So with that, I'll take any questions. And those questions could be anything related to these 3 projects that I shared, or I don't know, HCI research in general, or health informatics research in general. Yep.
How do you see the future of the quantified self-movement? I was searching this last year for a couple of work projects, and after seeing this, I still feel that it's like a basic consumer. It's a little bit lazy. It needs the extra effort. I tried food diary for a couple of weeks, but then I lost motivation somehow. Even though my girlfriend was pushing me to try. It's good, and we can self-reflect that. So I believe that when technology enables it to be easy, at that point it will be a nice thing. Now I see it as an issue. I should have this feature of myself.
So Thomas, you mentioned this notion of motivation, and different people have different level of motivation. And those people, quantified selfers, they have really high motivation, and I don't expect general public to have that kind of motivation. So depending on individual's motivation, I can see that different kinds of technologies can be designed. So for example, those with high motivation, they might be willing to take a more higher burden technology, because that's what motivates them, and they want to do this and by their hands. And they're putting a lot of effort in analyzing the data, which is great. But for those who have low motivation, I think that more automatic way of capturing data can be more suitable for them. so that they don't have to put a lot of effort in the first place, but then if it generates really interesting insights, then they can gain those motivations along the line. So, yeah, that's how I see it. But just by lowering the capture burden and making everything automatic is not the right way either, because you gain a lot of different insights as you dig into your data, which is actually a lot of manual effort. If I just show you some numbers, you might not be too interested in doing the numbers, and you might lose your interest. But if you collect data by yourself, I think people think that they feel more achieved in some sense. So almost the data becomes a tangible thing for these many folks that I presented to you. So yeah, depending on different motivations, there are different ways of designing technology. Other questions?
So I have a question about the quantified self-births, and regarding the like technology literacy and the health literacy, does like having them have a high technology literacy make them to do quantified self, or is it like the backwards can happen also?
So technology literacy or health literacy is also a very interesting. It's a field of research. Actually, so a lot of people who don't have high health literacy, they tend to eat bad, very poor, nutritious food. They tend to not exercise. So people are trying to increase the health literacy of people in general. So what people do is, instead of telling people using numbers or text, they use visualizations, believing that some good visualization can help people understand what the data actually means. So that's one way of that's what other researchers are working on. Like, for example, when you try to communicate health risk of something, it's really difficult to understand the risk or percentage or the combinations. But then if you use simple infographics, then it's easier to understand. So health literacy has been studied a lot in the health risk communication aspects. Not much in designing this kind of feedback though, because right now we are talking about those who are already using technology or who are active users of technology or tech savvy, mostly highly educated, who have good socioeconomic status. So we are not thinking a lot in terms of how to help people with health literacy when designing this kind of tool. But then I think it will eventually become a really important problem when we are designing this kind of tool for a whole lot of general public.
You mentioned about Quantified self-research conference. I'm wondering, are they guided or advised by experts, like medical people?
The people who go and present their practice at Quantified Self conferences are not necessarily guided by medical people, but some presenters are actually medical experts and doctors who are practicing Quantified Self for themselves or who are prescribing Quantified Self to their own patients. So it's a mix of group. And there are different tracks. So for example, the biggest track is called Show and Tell, where people present their practice, Quantified Self practice for 7 minutes, and then there's a long Q&A session in the end. And usually there are medical experts in the audience, and they usually talk about the medical implications of their tracking. Although there's a huge movement in the patient community about patient empowerment, where it's patients who know about themselves better than anybody else. So it's shifting the whole dynamic between patients and doctors. And usually in the Asian culture, we go to see doctor and then we just ask everything to them and we assume that they know more than us. But then now this whole dynamic is shifting with all these tools that are available. So patient empowerment, it's a really important concept, and I really fully support this patient empowerment concept. So I really want people to be empowered by using this kind of tools, so that they can learn more about themselves. And it helps them to ask the right questions for the doctors too. It's not just passively consuming knowledge, but it makes people more active so that they can ask the right questions to the doctors based on their own difficulties.
At the onset of your presentation, you mentioned about you were looking for cities and countries who are involved in quantified efforts, but we could not find any one of them in Korea. But everybody knows that Korean people are techno-savvy people. But why do you think you cannot find any quantified effort movement people in Korea?
That I honestly don't know, and I was surprised that there was no single meetup groups in Korea. I don't have an answer. Do you guys suspect why that might have happened?
I think this quantified self movement has to relate with you seeing your smartphone as beyond just a communication device. I think a lot of Korean adults, like 40, 50, those people still view their smartphone as just a communication device, which relates a lot with a high installation rate, the KakaoTalk. So I guess that still phase is kind of pushing this new quantified self movement coming into Korea.
What about the younger generation? I mean, I was really surprised on finding that it was a whole meetup group. Maybe I'm just thinking out loud. Maybe that has to do with, I don't know, presenting in English, because they have to do that to share their practice. That could be one.
This is the big one.
That could be a big one.
Yeah.
So I think it's either not knowing that this kind of thing exists, like a quantified self as a community, maybe that's one, or even if they know that they don't have high motivation to actually create this kind of community, because they might well do well without this kind of community anymore.
Any other questions?
I have one more
Last
question.
one.
So I'm getting the Quantified Self newsletter every week, and the
Really?
recent newsletter was hot debate about the privacy of these my data regarding health and any other tracked devices. So you have looked into a lot of this health data, and were you like finding that there is this very danger in this sharing tracked data and regulations, I think?
I think it has multiple levels when you talk about privacy. In general, I think if it's well anonymized, it's actually not a huge deal when you share your data with your, for example, if there's sleep data of 10,000 people, and if it's all anonymized, I think it has a lot of value for the research community, because then they can do interesting analysis based on this anonymized data of the sleep data that hasn't been possible in the past, because people had to go to the lab to record their day-long data instead of the year-long data, right? But then if you're talking about sharing your data with someone you know, for example, I talked about this different ways of sharing your data with your doctors or your friends or your family members. it has a whole different notion of privacy. Let's say you are sharing your step count data with your father or mother, and they saw some kind of a peaks at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. And they expect you to sleep during that time, but they saw some peaks there. And they might naturally question what's happening, what's going on, and why isn't my son sleeping at 2 a.m.? So the chances are you don't want to share that level of detail, right? Then you have to share less granular data, your personal data when you're sharing with your family. It's not anonymizing the data, but it's sharing less granular data. Or when you think about sharing your health data with your boss or your insurance company, they might charge you more because they know that now you're smoking, for example, you are a heavy smoker. If you track all that and if their insurance company requires you to share that kind of data, then that has whole different privacy notions. So depending on what you ask, it can be,
Yeah, I think that answers a whole variety of aspects.
yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
All right. Thank you for sticking to your chair for 2.5 hours.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's a long hour, and let's give our thankful appreciation to Dr. Chen.